Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unlocking Fitness podcast. Today I have with me Hugh Gilmore, who is a sports psychologist who's worked with world champions and Olympians. He's experienced in delivering sport and performance psychology to British weightlifting and Paralympic weightlifting. He's also worked with the English Institute of Sport, Weightlifting Ireland, Northern Ireland Netball and British Athletics. He's supported a range of elite coaches and business professionals seeking personal development, and he's trained in motivational interviewing and rational emotive behaviour therapy, as well as being a performance psychologist. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the importance of negative emotions. I'm excited to have Hugh with us today, and let's just dive in. All right, so welcome everybody to the Unlocking Fitness podcast. Today I have with me Hugh Gilmore, who is going to be talking about emotions today and how important they are as coaches and what we need to be able to notice and recognize in ourselves and in other people as well. So welcome, Hugh.
Thanks very much. It's quite a privilege to be here, Sarah. I know some of your previous guests have been big hitters, so it's been nice to be here. So we're going to be talking about emotion today, and I'm looking forward to it. It's something that we don't often really know how to talk about, or something that is really, I suppose, difficult to understand, because part of the issue, I think, with the emotion is, where does it fit into coaching? And why does it need to fit in? Why do we need to think about it? And there's two aspects within that. There's the aspect of how do we understand our own emotions, but also how do we understand other people's emotions who we're coaching? Mm-hmm. I know from your background and experience, you obviously have a lot of people skills. Have you any thoughts on experiences with working with your own emotion or understanding other people's emotions as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I have PTSD, and sometimes I go into like a group session and I'm having a really bad day, and sometimes just the way something that the coach has asked me to do can trigger me a little bit, or I can push myself too hard with exercise that will trigger me, and I need to manage my own reactions to that within a group without having to explain to everybody what's going on, which can be quite a personal thing to me. And as long as I feel comfortable talking to the coach about it, then they can just be like, well, okay, you need to do what you need to do. And, they just carry on with the group, which is obviously what group coaches need to do. But it can be quite difficult the more that those mental health kind of issues arise, especially with lockdown and everything with COVID, there's more and more of these issues arising, people not coping with their emotions very well, and I think as coaches, it's really important for us to be aware of that, but also, like you said, manage ourselves as well as individuals within the group. So, everybody's been to a coaching session just to, they're hungry, or they're just been caught up in the car or something like that, and they just kind of go in all frustrated. And, that's happened too, because, over 30 years that's bound to, but yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me when I was coaching a session once, and I was late to the session because of traffic. Mm-hmm. I was traveling 2.5 hours to do the coaching at my local club because I'd moved away for work.
Wow.
And I was very angry when I arrived, just because of the fact that I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm late, I'm frustrated. And then I began to coach, and it wasn't the best of coaching sessions because I was coaching angrily.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really great point you raise, is because people don't realize that emotions are not just affected by, what's inside us, but also what we put into us. Your blood glucose levels, for example, they will drop significantly, and that prevents then your ability to emotionally regulate yourself, because if you're hungry, you don't have the cognitive energy to sit and go like, right, what do I need to do here? What do I need to think about? How do I get myself out of this emotion? Mm-hmm. And self-regulate how you interact with other people. So, being tired, being fatigued, being under a lot of stress, and being hungry are things that are going to impact you, how you present and how you manage your own emotions as a coach. But also, like, you need to consider that of your players and the athletes that you're coaching. Like, you know, are they able to actually, is that a quick fix to them self-regulating themselves? Are they properly nourished? Are they properly rested? Are they going through a period of stress in their life? So again, interesting things to consider. When we talk about emotions, we can sometimes talk about the biopsychosocial model, and that's a very common model within psychology. So it's like the things that affect us, the things that, you know, create our experiences are both biological or psychological and sociological, and sociological being interaction with other people. So again, how other people interact with us can then cause us experiences where we by then judge it and create an emotion from that.
It's fascinating. Facebook especially, you know, all the social media platforms, you could ask somebody, how are you, or are you okay, and somebody will fly off the handle and somebody else would be like, oh, that's really nice, thanks for asking. You know, it's like, it depends on how they feel themselves as to how they react to that simple question, you know. But if somebody is a little bit hungry, or they're maybe a little bit tired, I mean, I do it myself all the time. You know, somebody can ask you a simple question, you just snap at them and you don't even know you're doing it, you know, so then they snap back and you're like, whoa, what does that come from? You know?
Yeah. And that's really interesting, because whenever somebody snaps back, it's, why are they snapping back? What is it they've interpreted? How does that sit against how they judge the world in that interaction? That's the thing that's causing the snapback, you know? It's their interpretation of the event and also their judgment of the event. Quite often, there's two things that we say. I work as a sports psychologist, but one of the therapies that I'm trained in is rational and emotive behavior therapy.
Wow.
And the issue that we say causes people's disturbance or the snapping back is that somebody has both a belief and a demand about the situation. They believe that that person shouldn't have done or said that thing in that certain way, and they demand that they do not, and therefore they become disturbed about it, and then they act in a way that maybe they're not potentially going to be happy about later on when they reflect on that process. So it's the belief and then the demand that shape what emotion comes out. I think it's probably good to give a worked example of that.
Sure.
For coaches. So an example being that if I come at you with baseball, baseball bat, you might be scared. You might go, oh, he's coming at me with a baseball bat. But if we were playing baseball and I was coming towards you with a baseball bat, you wouldn't be scared. So the difference there is not that I have a baseball bat. That's not the thing that makes you scared. What makes you scared is the judgment that you're placing. Am I in harm, or is Hugh coming to give me a present of this lovely baseball bat? So it's the judgment of, am I going to be harmed, versus what the other judgment of, oh, we're about to play a game of baseball. So it's the context is the thing which gives us cues to that, and then the internal judgment. But then similarly, you know, we can have scenarios where some people are happy and some people are sad. I think it's the Germans have a word called Schadenfreude, where it's an emotion or a word that doesn't exist in English, and what it describes is taking pleasure at someone else's misfortune, which, you know, we all do that from time to time. but the point is that our understanding of the world is shaped by the language that we have and the judgments that we make, and the context that somebody, you know, so in that context, somebody taking pleasure from somebody else's defeat, somebody else might judge that and go, oh, that was really bad that they got defeated. So we don't have the same emotions or the same reactions to other people because we have different internal beliefs. And I think that's, as a coach, that's the thing that we need to think about, is that everybody on your team, everybody who you coach, has different opinions about things, and it's good for those to have different opinions.
Yeah.
If they didn't, then you'd just be in a state of groupthink, and it'd be a very, you know, difficult environment where everybody would think the same and do the same and produce the same results, but there wouldn't be an ability to adapt and be creative. So having divergent beliefs and different beliefs and different judgments is beneficial for a team's development, but ultimately it's the communication process around that, bringing people back in so that you can discuss beliefs and contexts and judgments in such a way that people can actually work together as a team. I feel as if I've gone down a rabbit hole there.
No, I don't think so. I was thinking an example to me of that, given that movement is my kind of thing, and I like to allow people the freedom to do whatever movements they like, especially when it comes to stretches and warm-ups and stuff like that. So I'll often give people an instruction like, I don't know, position yourself with one foot in front of the other and move in a way, or position yourself where you can feel the most stretch. And you look around the room, and if you've got 10 people in the room, you've got 10 different ways that people are standing, just because they can feel it in different ways. And it's no real difference in terms of the physical stretch or the emotional reaction that you're explaining, that everybody's internal kind of regulations are different, everybody's beliefs are different, everybody's sensations are different. So this conversation might feel a bit kind of intimidating to a lot of coaches who are maybe kind of new at this, maybe never heard of this kind of conversation before, but actually we're already working with people and they're all different anyway. So just bringing this to the fore and giving people some skills and some tips to maybe deal with this kind of stuff on a more conscious level maybe is probably a good thing.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, for a person to realize in terms of a tip, is that people need to be emotionally responsible. And what I mean by that is that nobody causes you to feel an emotion. Mm-hmm. The emotion is felt by you because you have chosen, either through habit or perception or decision, that you have chosen that feeling to experience it. And you can change that when you change your belief about the situation. So an example being, there are people who, and you can look through the newspaper articles about athletes, for example, who are happy to be injured because they didn't want to play. Right. You know? And that's an interesting thing, mm-hmm. where somebody might not want to play or might not want to do rehab because they don't want to do the rehab because they think they're rushing it, and therefore they've got a different view on how they feel about the injury compared to the support team around them. Mm-hmm. So someone's underlying belief is the thing that causes an issue. And what we would say is that when that belief is black and white or all and nothing, that can be very difficult. Okay, so an example would be, I must not be pushed to return to play at this pace. It should be 8 weeks. They want me to return to play in 6 weeks. I shouldn't be pushing this. Mm-hmm. My third injury, I don't need another one. I need to think about the long-term benefit, right? Mm-hmm. When somebody says I shouldn't, that's like, well, if I said I shouldn't be driving a Subaru, I should be driving a Ferrari, I'm only going to be disappointed. Do you know? That's a very strong demand, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we can see if I need and I should have a Ferrari, well, then if I don't have a Ferrari, I'm going to be very disappointed. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the same scenario with the injury, if they should and they need to postpone their rehab and make it longer, then again, that's going to drive a strong emotional reaction to any communication from physio or manager or coach, etc. And what we want to do is we want to realize that the demands and beliefs that we place should be flexible. Mm-hmm. So instead of saying I should or I need, it should be I would prefer to, but I will continue this path until a certain point, and then I can change my course of action. I can take it as it comes. So it's about changing our beliefs to being more flexible, allows for a better behavior or better cognitive thought. And I think that's an important thing to think about, is that the beliefs cause the emotions, but the beliefs also cause the thoughts, and they also cause our behaviors. So a good example of this is anger. If I'm angry that I'm being forced to do a rehab in 6 weeks, I might verbally or physically attack the coach if I'm very angry about it. And I might have thoughts of revenge of, I'll show them, I'll make sure and, mess things up. I'm not going to put everything into this. They think like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what we would prefer is we would prefer to have healthy anger, which is, I want to be able to assert myself and draw boundaries. And I want to be able to have thoughts about how I would assert myself and go, look, I understand your view, but I also have a valid view in this point, and this is my body, and this is my sport and my career, and I'm the one who's going to pick up the pieces afterwards if I have a dodgy leg,
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, the belief that we have of anger, the demanding belief, will produce unhealthy anger, whereas the flexible belief will allow us maybe to have more space to think and judge, to create healthy anger where we can assert ourselves as opposed to attack. And I think that's a big point from what I wanted to get across in this podcast is there's no such thing as a negative emotion. There's just emotions, and the judgment you place on it comes from your view of that emotion.
Sure.
You want to try and make them adaptive.
Yeah.
Well, how does that sit with you? What's your understanding of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult from a coach's point of view if they coming at this from completely new. It's like, I get that, I totally understand, but how do I make it so that all of the 25 people in my group, I can manage that expectation of what they want, and we can all communicate in this way? Is there something that I can do as a coach, as a leader of the group, that can help those people to verbalize those emotions better than maybe I'm doing now? Is there any kind of language that I could use that would help?
That reminds me of a session I did with my local GAA club many years ago, and I was asked in to talk to them about psychology. And very simply, I got them all at one point, one of the exercises, to line up and in the middle of the hall. And I said, 0 to 10, you're on 0 this way, or not, like a Likert scale. So you're 0 to 10, 10's over there, 1's down there, you're in the middle. And I said, should your managers make decisions based on development or performance in the league? And then, people moved across the room.
Mm-hmm.
And they, some people were like, it should always be about winning. Some people should always be about developing a team. And then you got this picture, from a bird's eye view of where everybody was standing. And then you could see like all these people in the room have different judgments when it comes to the league. And then when it comes to the championship, how should decisions be made? Mm-hmm. And again, it's in that way, what that's doing is we're not talking about emotion. We're talking about the judgments people make.
Yeah.
Their beliefs about how things should be done, because that's what produces the emotion.
Okay.
It's the judgments or beliefs about how they think things should be done. And the thing is, in any room, you're going to have, if you've got 30 people, you've got 30 different judgments. They're
Mm-hmm.
never all the same, but you might group a group of them close together,
mm-hmm.
but they're not going to be all the same whenever you pare down into it. And a good example is, if somebody doesn't turn up to training, how should they be picked for the upcoming game? And some people said, yeah, it's only a one-off, right? Or it should be up to the coach to decide who gets to go. But other people might go, well, no, if they come up, miss one training, they shouldn't be playing.
Mm-hmm.
And other people might go, well, if you miss one training, that's okay. But if you miss 3 trainings, that's not okay. And somebody else might be 4. So there's a gradation between like one viewpoint and another. And that's the problem when you're managing people,
mm-hmm.
is that being granular enough to get down into the nitty gritty of what does this look like, that will help you then understand their beliefs, which may then help you understand their emotions. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that is quite a simple thing that most coaches can do. Mm-hmm. If they want to establish the group consensus, really, or establish where people are at with certain aspects of the coaching, Maybe it's the tactics, or maybe it's the team selection, or maybe it's, like you said, the championship game, like what should we do? And it's not necessarily that the coach is just giving over control to the whole group. It's just that to be able to establish where your players are at or where your team are at is really helpful to move forwards in terms of how you speak to them. Because if you have your own beliefs about something as a coach, and you're just telling them in the way that you think, if they're not listening, or they feel like they're not listening, or they're not responding in the way that you're expecting, that maybe that little trick of asking them to stand in a line and move to where they think could help you to communicate with them a bit better.
Well, I think you highlighted a really good point there, is like, how do you become aware of your own emotions as well? Because whenever you're looking at the team and their decisions and their beliefs in the things, you have to realize as a coach, you have your own beliefs and you have your own judgments.
Sure.
And actually, that's going to be in conflict to some of your players. So it's about understanding that if you know what your beliefs and judgments are, that will help you understand why you have a certain emotional reaction to those players who never quite gel and always stand out and always cause issues. Well, it's not that they're bad people, it's they have different beliefs and they think that certain things are appropriate. So I think in that scenario, a really good tip for coaches is clarity of expectations. And the way you do that is you don't tell people what you want, you ask them what they want.
Yeah.
You give them the problem to solve. And I think that's the big thing, is that if you come in and you say, like, realistically, we want everybody to turn up to training early, right? The common, bugbear of coaches, people turn up late.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you say, right, guys, as a team, how do you think we should deal with this? And give them their viewpoints, that then allows them an opportunity to voice their opinion, but also creates an opportunity to create clarity of expectations, which then changes those demands or beliefs that they might have about how they should be treated when they turn up late or do whatever other behavior it is. And I think another tip for coaches is, when I talk about psychology, I always try and make it OAP. That's a politically incorrect term for a senior citizen nowadays. But when I talk about OAP, what I mean is it observable, is it achievable, and is it promotable? And the reason being is, if I say, right, we want people who are confident, or we want people who are committed, my judgment of committed is different from your judgment of committed.
Mm-hmm.
But when I take that and I make it OAP, what I actually do is I make it observable. On a Tuesday night at 7 p.m, what does committed look like? And you're going to get different opinions. And then you go, is this achievable on a Tuesday night? Sometimes we'll say people need to not be late. Well, that's not achievable, because you've only stated it in a way that we will know that it's not been met. We said don't be late, and they were late.
Mm-hmm.
What was one who says being committed looks like being in your gear in the changing room 2 minutes before practice starts. And that's an observable thing. We can achieve that. We know exactly what that is. And then, is it promotable? And promotable is all to do, especially with teamwork, is like, is this something we can talk about publicly within the team? And that's useful because we want to create standards which people then bring together, and they can talk about them. If it's not promotable, if you've got a different version of commitment, and you've got, commitment for you is like some magical ritual that you do, and taking some medication and some special warm-up that you do because that's just the way you've evolved as a player, then that's not something we want to maybe promote in the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
So we need like agreed definitions of what these what commitment looks like, or these other things. And again, so observable, achievable, promotable, OAP. If you're talking about something and you haven't ran it through that framework, you're not talking about something, and the other person's not talking about it with you. They're talking about something different.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because commitment is one of those things that people perceive when you use the example of being late. But if somebody's leaving work and they've made that commitment to leave work on time, but there isn't enough time to drive from work to the training session and be there that 2 minutes early, actually their commitment is coming in the first place. And if they're there and they're 5 minutes late because, you know, there isn't physically enough time to get there, then is that acceptable to the rest of the team, that that person is always going to be a few minutes late and you'd rather them there than not, you know?
Yeah. You know, that's a great point. And I think this is where, again, we get, you know, I used to sit in the board of directors for Netball Northern Ireland. And one of the interesting conversations I had with the head coaches was, you had women who were working on minimum wage jobs and, you know, maybe multiple jobs and doing shift work.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had other ones who were like professionals getting paid a really good salary. And then there was gripes within the teams of, you know, well, this person's not turning up to training, but like their commitment is that whenever they go to training, that they miss a shift, that significantly impacts them financially compared to somebody else who doesn't. So again, it's like people's personal circumstances dictate both how committed they could be, but also their understanding of what they can put into that. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think, you know, we've talked about emotions here in a broader applied way, and I think it's worthwhile just running through a couple of understandings of what emotions are and their basically what the people would assume negative emotions are. So there's a bit of research on the original sort of what emotions are. The big sort of 5 of them is fear, anger, sadness, disgust, and happiness. And those are the main 5. But actually, there's probably about 5 million emotions, because what we get is we get a mix of them. We don't get them all at once. We get a mix of them, and, you know, we can get then different levels of emotion. Within rational emotive behavior therapy, we work with the 8 kind of emotions that people present with generally, and we seek to turn those into healthy negative emotions. So you've maybe got unhealthy anger, and then you seek to turn that into healthy anger. So anxiety, people who experience anxiety, that's actually a useful thing. There's a really interesting case of what was known as patient SM in America, who was a child who had their amygdala, part of the brain, eaten away through Urbach-White disease.
Wow.
And as a result, they couldn't experience fear. So they went their whole life and didn't experience any fear. Now, they were mugged, held at knife point and gunpoint, made terrible decisions about walking down alleyways and things like this when they shouldn't have, late at night, but never experienced any distress from this, and had no issues with personal space and things like that, but also couldn't pick up on other people's cues for, like, oh, you're too close, or I don't like you, or I don't like that. So because of this disease that they had, with no amygdala, the no fear response, they ended up getting in a lot of difficulty because of that. And it shows you just how important a negative emotion like fear is because without it, you know, you essentially are going to end up in difficulty. But this is why, you know, we don't really particularly want anxiety, which might cause us to do unhealthy behaviors. We want ourselves to experience concern, and that will be, we can be concerned about something and can confront it and deal with the threat, and we can have a realistic appraisal of the situation. Whereas, you know, if we've got anxiety, we might go, right, I'm not avoiding that situation, I'm going to back away from it, I'm going to make sure I'm never exposed to that. And we might overthink the negative consequences of the threat. And this is interesting because, you know, when we think about spiders and phobias of spiders, things like that, it's a classic one. It's like, you get better by being exposed to it. So that's like an example of, you know, you want your anxiety to be concerned. Same with depression. It's like you want to experience sadness. As you get less depressed, you want to experience more sadness, because sadness is actually allows you to talk about it with people and connect with people and build that social relationship. So whereas depression, I've had depression, and it's a very withdrawn situation where you withdraw from the society, you withdraw from things so that you don't become exposed to them, and you limit how much you connect. And you know, that's not good, because the connections with people help us recover. Guilt, again, guilt isn't a healthy emotion. We want to turn that into remorse, because we all make mistakes, we all make bad decisions, We all do things deliberately sometimes and by accident and make mistakes, and that's fine. So we want to move that into remorse. Similarly with hurt, if we feel hurt, really we want to feel sorrow and sadness that this is, that we've been hurt, as opposed to feeling like hurt, right? Oh, this is I want to go and sulk, and that they need to go and make the first move to repair this. It should be a case of I feel sorrow about this, and I'm going to communicate openly, and that way you're going to get to a position of resolving things. So what I'm listing here is the emotions, and then the different reaction we would have with those emotions, whether they're healthy versus whenever they're unhealthy. So a big way you want to think about what emotions you're experiencing is this emotion causing me to do something that is not beneficial for the long term or the short term? Is this an adaptive response or non-adaptive response? Because whenever we can think about that, is my reaction to this helping me or helping the situation? That's when we start to, we're in the realm of performance there. We're in the realm of actually changing behaviors and being more productive. And a good example, I could go on talking about this, but a good example is when a player gets angry at the referee.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that when a coach gets angry at a referee, I'm sure that happens.
Yeah.
So when that's occurred, we need to think like, what is the response we're having, and is the response helping? I've seen a team lose a game because of an indignant player kept standing in front of the referee and the ball, and the free kept being moved forward 4 or 5 times, and and it's like, okay, well done. You feel as if something wrong has been done, but what your response did actually got the referee against you, cost the team a score, and wasn't helpful. It's a non-helpful way to respond to it. So, and again, I think in scenarios like that, it's like getting players and getting coaches to evaluate the behavior after the heat of the moment. And I think that's a big thing, is because when we experience strong emotions, they can take us over. We need to reflect back on them. And by reflecting back, we can prepare better for next time and go, what are the thoughts I had? What are the feelings I had? What are the behaviors I did? When I recognize them next time, I'm going to stop and take a breath and change them, because it's not a helpful response.
Yeah, and I think, everyone can recognize certain emotions in other people. So as a coach, it's not something, that's totally foreign to you. It's, you recognize when a player's upset, or you recognize when they're, overreacting to something. And if you can take a breath for a second, and rather than either react to them or have the rest of the team react to them, if we can just take a breath for a second and just go, hang on a minute, is this a negative emotion that's just a bit too strong? How can we manage this? If we can ask some questions to that player of, do you think this response is helpful? What would be your best case situation? And, all those kinds of questions that are really simple to ask, can help to start manage the situation a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think I've got one last tip that I think is useful for coaches. And I've talked already about emotional responsibility, that you're responsible for your emotions. Players are responsible for theirs. Everyone's responsible for their own behavior. And one of the activities that I'll do with athletes is basically get them to write down a list of all the things that they blame other people for, blame the organization for, the other teams for, the referee, just a blame dump, basically. So dump everything down that you put blame out. And this happens all throughout sports. I've been involved in a number of different sports as a coach at under 8 level and right up to board of directors level, and as a coach educator, and also as a sports psych as well. But the big thing is, people say, oh, those people up on the board don't do that, right? And the people on the board have said that the coaches need to buy into this process of coaching and change their ways of coaching. And athletes to be complaining about how the organization of the league or the structures of the competitions, people will be blaming other people. So you do a complete blame dump, and then draw a line down the side of that, and on the other side of that, you write responsibility at the top. What's your responsibility? Because whenever you take responsibility for all these things that you've got blame, you're changing your response in from a moaning, complaining response into a empowered, into a controlled, into an autonomous, I'm in control response, and this is what I can do to help the situation. And that's a better way to conduct yourself. But also what it does, it highlights the shortcomings. People don't like doing it because they realize all I've been doing is moaning and complaining instead of actually responding in a way that benefits me, society, the team, and the sport.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I mean, so many people don't actually recognize that they are responsible for their own emotional reactions to things. You know, they don't recognize that they can choose to react in a different way. And when people recognize that, then they stop sometimes with the anger and all the rest that's not helpful, and they go, hang on a minute, I don't need to feel this. And they can just feel something else, which is pretty cool, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the big thing there is like, how do you convince somebody that doesn't believe that? So one of the interesting things is that if you look at the trauma and risk management courses that are run in the clinical side of things, these are run in military and police scenarios, and they're for people who've been through a difficult experience. The research and the process of that, they want to promote survivors and not victims. Mm-hmm. And victims are essentially, you behave like a victim whenever you take away for yourself and your recovery and future interactions, and also that you remove your power of this happened to you, where survivor is the survivor. I survived that experience and I did these things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting thing when it comes to coaching, is that when we're talking about emotional responsibility, the two questions were who's responsible for your emotions and behaviors. If you're not, tell me who that person is. And then the other one is, if I give you £4 million, can you change your behavior? And the answer is yes. They can, in that 30-second incident or 2-day incident, they can control their behavior. So it's a motivation issue and it's a responsibility issue. Now, there's going to be, if you're working with severely disabled people, people with brain injuries, there's more to consider than just that simplistic approach.
Sure.
But the crux of this is when you behave in an emotionally responsible way, you're not behaving like a victim because you're taking responsibility for yourself and you're being in control. And I think that's a big sort of mentality that you want to develop in people, is that you're not somebody who is not got a part to play. You've got something to do in dealing with every scenario that you face. Is you're responsible for part of it, of how you react to it. Yeah, so I think that's it's a big point to make. But if you can help people be more emotionally responsible, you're just helping people straight out to be better athletes and better performers, because they're no longer going to be dictated to you by, oh, the referee did this, or complaining about that.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk for hours. This is a really fascinating conversation, but is there anywhere that people can go to learn more about this kind of stuff from you? Have you got anywhere that they can kind of connect with you?
Well, a free workshop on the Wednesday the 19th on negative emotions on Eventbrite. You can get that if you go onto my social media, which is Hugh Gilmore at Instagram, or Hugh on Twitter, or just Google Podium Psychology. The link's in my bio for that talk. But generally speaking, I'm booked up 6 months in advance and don't have time to work with individual people. But I do, one of my things that I'm doing at the moment is setting up a rational emotive behavior therapy special interest group for sports psychs. But the other thing that I do is I train people in motivational interviewing as well, and there's an element of this emotional understanding within that. So if you're interested in that, you can check out my motivational interviewing training courses also. Yeah.
Well, it's been really interesting talking to you. I'm sure we will do it again some point. But thanks very much for your time. It's been really cool.
No worries. Thank you very much. It's been a great honor to be on the podcast.
The Unlocking Fitness podcast is a Most Motion original, hosted by me, Sarah Pitts. It's based on the Unlocking Fitness book series, which you can get from unlockingfitness.com. At the time of recording, book 1 in the series is available, with books 2 to 5 in the pipeline. You can find more Most Motion at mostmotion.com and on Facebook at Most Motion.